Hello and welcome back to Scottish Independence Podcasts. This week we have a real delightful event that we went to. We thoroughly enjoyed it. It was the Scottish SCND's Poetry Afternoon.
It was so good, and I have to admit, folks, that I wouldn't have gone to that if Fiona hadn't been encouraging me and saying, "Oh, maybe we could, maybe record it," and which is exactly what we did. And it was such a lovely afternoon. There were as many actual poets there reading their own poems, as well as people just reading, other people's poems. It was great. Peace and Poetry, lovely. It was called, wasn't it?
Peace and Poetry. And it was held in the Quaker Room in Glasgow. Very nice little venue. Cosy and informal and relaxed. And there was cake, does it get better? Poetry and cake.
There was cake. And the cake was just, I can't say how delicious it was. And it was made by a Ukrainian refugee who's obviously in contact with Scottish CND.
Poetry for Peace, a whole range of topics, often themed around peace and war. But it was very uplifting, even though it was very moving. Some of the poems will stay with you. Anyway, here we go. Let's go to the Quaker House and enjoy some poetry.
I just wanted to say a few words to explain why a Scottish campaign for nuclear disarmament really needs to have a poetry event, and to make it an annual event and to make it connected to Rabbie Burns. So the cultural industries in Scotland in general, and poetry maybe in particular, have been very kind to our movement. Poets, everyday scribblers, machers, occasional writers have spoken for us, walked with us, stood on platforms for us, allowed us to use their poems. So we are very grateful for that. Now, Robert Burns was the kind of poet that makes you see things more clearly, and sometimes makes you think about the world as it could be and should be, not as it actually is. So the Rabbie Burns that talked about apologising to his fellow creature, the mouse, because man had disturbed social union, nature's union. The Rabbie Burns that wanted a man's a man, the world our brothers be, for all that. He believed in justice. He would see the interconnections between colonialism, the military-industrial complex, the arms trade, nuclear weapons. He would have been anti-nuclear, I believe, if he had been alive in this time. But he was also a cheery chap, a guy that gave you a good laugh. So the Rabbie Burns that wrote the great tale of Tam O'Shanter, or the tongue-in-cheek, I think, to a haggis, would have been giving us good cheer, and we need good cheer to get through a long campaign, like getting rid of nuclear weapons from Scotland, from the United Kingdom and from the world. So it's really important to celebrate Burns. And his birthday on the 25th of January now happens to fall just 3 days after a new anniversary, the anniversary of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which came into force in 2021 on the 22nd of January. And since coming into force, half the countries of the world have now signed up, all but one half. So the tide is turning against nuclear weapons. And sooner or later, we hope that there will be poems written to celebrate our success, because we've got rid of the damn things. And that actually the need for poetry will outlive the need for Scottish campaign for nuclear disarmament. So we're now on the build-up to another event in May 17th, Simon?
Yes.
We are trying to talk about peace economy and a Scotland that will tilt away from arms trade, from the military-industrial complex. And so that's the Scotland that will celebrate cultural industries as socially useful products, and poets will be among them. So thank you for being here.
As poets, that most inoffensive craft, you think to yourself, what on earth can we do to help that, to ameliorate that, and to make life better. But I always come back to this quote by Dylan Thomas. The world is never the same once a poem has been added to it. That brings me encouragement and inspiration and joy. Although, going back to that idea that in actual fact, sometimes you despair about what you can do. So I wrote this poem about that. It's called A Poet Reacts in an Age of Horror. Thank you for your submission. We have many submissions, and it's our policy to reply to each submission within 6 years. Please do not get in touch before that time. In that time, the yew in the garden will incrementally shut off more sun. In that time, tall white flowers will grow, fall and rise again. The clockwork of nature will tick on. Clouds will move endlessly across different coloured skies. In that time, children will be born so beautiful your eyes will ache to look upon them, and then they'll be torn apart by bombs. More trees will turn to ash, dictators will fill bank vaults. In that time, how many days will be spent drinking wine, craving sunshine and love? Something like 2,000 days. A lot of thought will go into that 6 years too, bunkers full. Where does it all go, that useless thought? It could run ocean liners if we had the technology. Maybe we will, and bad consciences will fuel the painful journeys we have left. Maybe after 6 years, your poem entitled A Poet Reacts to the Age of Horror might be published in a small Canadian magazine.
The Dipper. It was winter, near freezing. I'd walked through a forest of firs when I saw issue out of the waterfall a solitary bird. It lit on a damp rock, and as water swept stupidly on, wrung from its own throat, supple, undamnable song. It isn't mine to give. I can't coax this bird to my hand that knows the depth of the river, yet sings of it on land.
In Irpin, the bridge has laid down, drenched her dragon throat, heifer meek, offered her neck to the bladed weight of war. Through a rip of ribs, I see Kashka, Story, Ibis wader, ebb waltzer. She crosses carcass, treads barricades of beast, toils to lift her tenderness. Uncentered, I hold my hollowed belly close, wholly feared it will sunder should she drift. Not even the melt print of a fallen flake, her body more snow than flesh, more all her clothes worn together, all held against this pickling wind. It brines her bones, my tears. The thin of screen between us now, galaxy vast, I wish her wings, the freedom of the whole world's sky.
A very difficult situation if there's young children around. How do you explain the world to you? I mean, how do Palestinian people explain, who are living, explain to their children what's going on? So my youngest granddaughter is called Riona. Riona comes running into the room like her heroes, Peter Rabbit and Lily Bobtail. She's excited to show me her brand new shoes, and I tell her that they are really lovely on her. What I don't tell her, or can't tell her, is that thousands of 3-year-olds like her have been blown apart in far-off lands far away, and their mummies and daddies have also died. I don't tell her about the coils of razor wire, shiny and silver, that hang along the fence that surrounds Leonardo's on Ferry Road, like some strange, surreal, terrestrial coral reef. I can't explain to her that this place exists to manufacture weapons to kill lots of people in those far-off lands far, far away. And the razor wire is there to guarantee both deaths and profits. I don't explain this to her and can't tell her how the greed of the few is changing our climate, creating all these storms and burning our forests, heating up the world she is so in love with. I don't tell her about Nagasaki or Hiroshima, or about the thousands of other atrocities our species has committed, and commits still. I tell her she looks lovely in her brand new shoes.
I belong to the most incompetent part of SCND. I remember in 1973 when there was a thing about the cruise missiles at Greenham Common. You could, the SCND built a cruise missile for publicity purposes, and I booked it for the wrong time and the wrong place. And it turned up outside our house at 3 a.m. Sure. My daughter's reading Dante's Inferno just now, and she says there's a special place for well-meaning incompetent.
It's not a good place.
So this poem called Greenham Common was written by poet and novelist Helen Dunmore, and it was written in 1983, and that's when I first went to Greenham Common. I had a wee toddler and off I went, like so many other women at the time. Today is barred with darkness of winter. In cold tents, women protest, for once unveiled, eyes stinging with smoke. They stamp round fires in quilted anoraks, glamourless. They laugh often and teach themselves to speak eloquently. Mud and the camp's raw bones set them before the television camera. Absent the women of old photographs, holding the last of their 4 children, eyes darkened, hair covered, bodies waxy as cyclamen. Absent all those suffering ones. New voices rip at the throat, new costumes, metamorphoses. Soft-skirted, evasive women were drawn from the ruins, swirls of ash on them like veils. History came as a seducer and said, "This is the beauty of women in bombfall. Dolorous, you curl your skirts over your sleeping children." Instead, they stay at this place all winter, eat from packets and jars. Keep sensible, don't hunger, battle each day at the wires.
I'm going to read Maura Dooley's Talks About Talks. When I was in my mid-40s, I'd been running my own IT company for 20 years. I realised I was living a life without culture and decided to do something about it. A pretty simple cost-benefit analysis identified poetry as the so I found something called the Poetry Book Society, who dutifully sent me a box full of books every month. This did the trick and allowed me to be a consumer of poetry rather than a student. I know nothing of Maura Dooley other than the blurb in the back of her book, Kissing a Bone, that this comes from. My delight in this poem is undocumented, unanalysed, and I have nothing to say about it. You'll have to understand it on your own without any help from me, which would seem to be the whole point anyway. There's memory, there's truth, and there's the way the machine works. A splice, a little oil, a steady hand with the 2 wires. I could find a story in it for you that would beggar belief and you'd hate the ending. Or feel you'd heard it before it being not new but one of the 6 tales that roam the world in search of a teller. There's future, there's past, and there's politics. A speech, a little gossip, a shaky hand obeying a shaking head. I could find meaning in it for you, though it mightn't ring true, and you'd hate the translation, or feel you do better yourself with a bulky dictionary and body language. There's talk, there's silence, and there's the way you sit now. A table, a little fidgeting, the steady ticking of an old, sad clock. I could find history in it for you, though it mightn't be news, and you'd hate the film version, or feel you'd lived it already, if only you could remember when and where and why.
I seem to spend most of my life raging. I have to say it has gone worse in the last few years. And the poem is simply called Rage. I don't know why. I keep listening to the news. I don't know why the neighbours want to destroy the lush green lindens where baby birds are nesting. I don't know why I never turned into a decent housewife, but I'm not. Though I'm proud of my shelves stacked with books, I don't know why I'm allergic to house dust when my home is knee deep in the stuff, and allergic to pollen when I love trees. I suspect God's a bastard and thinks it's a joke. I don't know why they push refugees back into the Mediterranean at midnight and think we won't care. Why they lock migrant children up in the Texan desert, lonely and scared, and call it Camp Bliss. Why they pollute the air and pretend it's okay while the ice sheets melt. I mean, what the I don't know why we have such wretched poverty in a world that's so rich, why wars break out when we're longing for peace. But I do know this. I love the smell of washing fresh off the line. I love how each year ragged skeins of geese appear, honking loudly in the winter sky. How spider silk is strong as steel. How an octopus has 3 hearts and blood that's blue. And I love how my one heart races when I'm close to you. I don't know why I find it hard to write these days, but I guess I'm scared of so much rage at those with the power of f***ing us over, and I do know enough about long, dormant volcanoes that it's best, seriously, it's best that they don't erupt.
War. There are too many moments that we forget that there is a war, that bombs and shells and the dead fall elsewhere. My son asks if he will be put on a train, if he'll be sent to a camp, if he'll have to wear a star and leave us. And I say to him, no, not today, not yet, not us.
So it's a very simple and beautiful poem called Blackbird by George Gunn. If I were a blackbird, I would fly to your house and nest on the roof so that I could sing to you each morning of how once the world was young and full of song, and you would hear me singing, and you would see yourself, and the world of peace would surround you and gently fill you up with a green surge of longing.
In the event of a lack of oxygen, hold the earth in your hands. Be careful, she is hot. Talk to her tenderly, the way you might your mother at the end of her days. Honour her. Place her somewhere she might rest, perhaps the mantelpiece between your bone china swallow mid-flight, and your fake brass barometer, the shape of a ship's wheel that will not steer us out of the storm we are in. Despite her dishevelment, tell her how lovely she looks. Offer her tea, a scone, Horlicks if it still exists. Slip her feet into soft slippers. Massage her shoulders rounded from the burden you have placed on them. Cradle her in your arms. Now, go to the mountains. Yes, go. FaceTime will not suffice. Tell them you are sorry. Return with no selfies. This is not the time. Now, go to the rivers. Listen to them. Let them tell you their stories. Do not interrupt with your lies about your recycling, like you are not guilty of slipping glass jars and clean cardboard into the wrong bin. Now, get down on your knees and beg their forgiveness. Do not worry, their banks are no longer muddy. Your Levi's will stay dry. Understand, in the event of a lack of oxygen, no yellow masks will drop from the sky. Remove your stilettos. Leave all your personal belongings behind. Tiptoe past Earth's bed. Leave a note under her pillow. Apologise profusely. Tell her you'd drunk too much, that you weren't in your right mind, that you didn't realise just how much you loved her till she was gone. Speak when she speaks to you, if your shame will allow it. Make eye contact. Answer her questions with an honesty that will feel alien to you. Yes, we had ample opportunity. Yes, money was more important than water and air. Yes, we're tired of our empty promises too. Yes, coal, yes, carbon emissions, yes, methane, yes, plastic. Yes, dollars, yes, pounds, yes, euros, yes, yen, yes, vegan, yes, sweatshops, yes, you warned us. No, we didn't listen. Yes, we heard the bees are in default and the banks are foreclosing all hives. Yes, we should have planted more lavender, more rosemary, more bottle brush. Yes, flooding. Yes, fire. So, yes, species extinction. Yes, we should have been kinder. Yes, we should have stopped to think before we fucked her. Yes, we should have pulled out sooner. Yes, oral contraceptives. Yes, STDs. Yes, we should have used a condom. Yes, we are sorry. Yes, look at this mess now. Thank you. Thank you to Ali.
This is by Gerry Luce. This is why I went to Faslane. From the boot of the car, I took out the chainsaw and petrol can, as well as the hand axes and the maul. You never know what the police might object to at Faslane. I was at Faslane because I've spoken to survivors of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and in Nagasaki. I was at Faslane because in New Mexico and in Nevada, I have spoken to victims of fallout from atomic and nuclear testing. I was at Faslane because my uncle died early, a witness to atomic bomb testing at Bikini Atoll. I was there to remember these people. I was there today to protest with weapons of mass destruction in Scotland, yes, but lethal for all the world. Simple. Afterwards, to clear my thoughts, as I do when memory overwhelms, I went into Glenfruin above Faslane and watched a Navy frigate come into berth. I met an old man on a bicycle and a mallard drake sitting in the road. I also picked up some rocket hand-fired para-illuminating flares from war games in the Glen. I hope they will become museum artifacts, curios of a time when we were insane. I hope the old man on the bicycle made it to the top of the hill.
So this is a poem about my struggle with and eventual love for the Scots tongue, and I hope you enjoy. When I was a wean and I moved to Scotland, my folks started talking funny. All of a sudden, instead of going to the bazaar, we went to get messages. And I imagined a stack of letters, surprised at the then faggy plastic baggies my dad brought in. And my mum, she used to play these old Scots cassette tapes in the motor, all but a crawl that sat on a wall in pieces that you couldn't fling out 20-storey flats. And I laughed at the trombone playing on Marmalade. I didn't understand what it meant. And I had this classmate who told me he was Pony Butter, his pal, but I thought he said butter. And imagined his friend stuck between two pieces of bread covered in margarine. I didn't ken that my folks had changed their vowels to be understood, even when, while in Turkey, my dad was told what good English he spoke. A broad compliment for the son of a Tarbert lass. Then I changed my vowels too. When I was told I sounded posh and no in a good way, code switching in our tongues, desperate to find my clan. Where are you really from? The Uber driver asks. It's too complicated to say that I only said Glasgow to avoid sharing my life story with a stranger again. The tides changed when I learned to like whiskey. Varied and strong, it rolled on my tongue, burning my throat, but warming me to the core. Messages. Messages from the peat and the soil and the saltwater waves that form these flavours of ancient syllables that take decades to understand. Ugh, isn't it worth it?
Yay!
The permanence of the young man. No one outlives the grief of war, though they outlive its wreck. Upon the memory a scar through all their years will ache. Hopes will revive when horrors cease and dreaming dread be stilled, but there shall dwell within their peace a sadness unannulled. Upon this world shall hang a sign which summer cannot hide, the permanence of the young men who are not by their side.
This poem is called Protest. He made a dove on a stick and wrote his first and only poem. At number 10 Downing Street are all the thugs you can meet, in best writing under it. Mrs. Thatcher would have quailed to see my militant 5-year-old brandishing his dove in a sea of ban the bomb banners on that march. It was a sunny day, I remember. We ate ice cream and it mattered. I hadn't met you then, but knew you were on that march with Bruce Kent, Harold Pinter, Tony Benn, strutting the stuff of peace, addressing the rally in Hyde Park. Next morning he asked me, "Have they banned it yet?" I started to explain. "I'm not going again," he said, implacably dunking soldiers in his breakfast egg. 30 years on, I'd like to think that he wasn't right. That poetry and protest might, just might, keep all of us alive for ice cream in the park and sun.
Can I just ask for a wee show of hands for anyone other than me who was glued to their television set at 3 o'clock in the morning on the 21st of July 1969, when Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon? Yeah? Well, it's more than I thought. You're all doing very well. You're doing well, by the way. John Kennedy famously said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." It turns out that eradicating poverty or racism or ending the war in Vietnam was much, much harder than going to the moon. But my 16-year-old self only saw a technological triumph. Just a few years later, I heard Gil Scott-Heron's LP, Small Talk at 125th and Lennox, which had this poem in it. My understanding of the space race was, from that moment, seen through the lens of this poem. It was an important unfolding capitalism's lies moment for me, was finding this LP. A rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. I can't pay no doctor's bills, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now I'll be paying still while Whitey's on the moon. The man just upped my rent last night because Whitey's on the moon. No hot water, no toilets, no lights, but Whitey's on the moon. I wonder why he's upping me because Whitey's on the moon. Well, I was already giving him 50 a week with Whitey on the moon. Taxes taking my whole damn check. Junkies making me a nervous wreck. The price of food is going up. And if all that shit wasn't enough, a rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arm began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. Was all that money I made last year for Whitey on the moon? How come I ain't got no money here? Whitey's on the moon. You know, I just about had my fill with Whitey on the moon. I think I'll send these doctor's bills, Airmere special, to Whitey on the moon.
So this is Blaeberries. Spring's still sharp, but the calm has sent out her heralds, and we are sheltered from that white water whale at Black Gorge. In the village hall with Jill and Natalie, I dip flatbread into saffron oil, spoon the simple mothering of hummus to my mouth, and we watch Fadia's tree. How she yearns for her grandfather's mulberry in Sassa. We believe it too, that the roots will remember her, even though we know she's never seen them, that a border refuses her belonging, that her children cannot feel the purpling fruit decorate their fingers. And we can hardly bear it, saying that we all wake with Gaza now. It's not the same at all, but like a tree rehung with windfall to tempt waxwings in winter, my body is broken. Later, kissing farewells at the woodland gate, beneath the sycamores, giant sentinels of their own wisdom, I look to the banks of the Rotten Rock Path, where Anna, who recalls her childhood in Norway better each day, has planted blaeberries. Small and nurture needful, like the bairns now untwining from distracted parents, adult blethers, to lie amid the soft shelter of this wise friend's gift, a minding of her even when she might forget herself. I love it for them, the children living in this possible moment, in the friendship of berries. Thank you.
The poem's called Udi, Udi One Day, in memory of Udi Abu Mohsen, who lived only one day after being killed during the siege of Gaza, 2023. Udi was the baby boy's name, Udi it was. He would have known so little, but he would have known he was someone with being. He would have been welcomed and loved. He would have been welcomed with fear and would have known little of the blast that ended his one-day-old life, Mayfly Udi. Yet he leaves behind much more than a name. He leaves behind the insanity of surgical strikes, the criminality of collateral damage, the nonsense of precision bombing, the lunatic costs and profits of warfare set against the massacre of the innocents. Udi's death certificate was bizarrely issued before any birth certificate arrived. and the bombing continued after his death. But Mayfly Udi must be remembered, and not just in Gaza and in Palestine, not just there. The cry of Udi must be heard in Israel, in Syria, in Iraq, in Russia, in Ukraine, in Yemen, Tigray and Sudan. Udi's little whimper should cross oceans, mountains and plains, teeming cities and deserts, turning louder all the time, so that the whole world begins to realise that without justice there is no peace, that only justice can guarantee peace. Udi, one day peace and justice will reign in your name. Udi, one day.
Rum and raisin, vanilla, butterscotch, walnut, peach. You would rhyme off all the flavours. That was before they murdered the ice cream man on the Lisburn Road. And you brought carnations to lay outside his shop. I named for you all the wild flowers of the Burren I had seen in one day. Thyme, valerian, loosestrife, meadowsweet, twayblade, crowfoot, ling, angelica, herb robert, marjam, cow parsley, sundew, veitch, mountain avens, wood sage, ragged robins, stitchworth, yarrow, lady's bedstraw, bindweed, bog, pimpernel. Thank you.
She's got Dania Ersheid on her way home from school. I imagine my beautiful 15-year-old, her head filled with fantasy novels, irony, her face pasted on the blue screen of the future, standing at a checkpoint while soldiers root through her bag and empty the contents, school books, tampons, a pencil case, a keyring, some small tubes of makeup from Superdrug on the ground. She raises her arms and says, "I have no knife," in a confused, surprised tone, annoyed too, because she doesn't suffer fools gladly, and then she is shot 8 times and left face down in the dust to bleed to death, while her killers shoulder arms and jabber on their mobile phones. It is easy to imagine, and likewise impossible. Injustice rolls on like some juggernaut too loud and lurid to challenge. As I read and write this, my lager on the table, an autumn night settling outside, the staff of the pub are sticking skeletons in glass, preparing for Halloween.
This is a poem by Jackie Kay. Jackie's poem, George Square. My 77-year-old father put his reading glasses on to help my mother do up the buttons at the back of her dress. "What a pair the two of us are," she said. "Me with my sore wrists, and you with your bad eyes and your soft thumbs." And off they went to march against the war in Iraq. Him with his plastic hips and her with her arthritis, to congregate in George Square, where the banners were waving to each other like old friends, flapping. Where they'd met for so many marches over their years. For peace on earth, for pity's sake, for peace, for peace.
Cracked. I'm fine. It's what I always say when asked, except today, when with a sigh I said, I think I'm slightly cracked. You flinched as if I'd pierced you with a piece of broken glass, and in an instant I regretted it. We chatted on, the usual, when will it ever end, hardly see anyone these days, and all the while the sun blazed down, a giant golden spoon tap, tap, tapping on our heads so hard I swear my skull was cracking like a boiled egg shell. I said, see you around, like I believed it, though I don't believe anything anymore. Fires are raging in the suburbs, wars exploding everywhere, oceans swallowing the land in great mouthfuls of beach and cliff. The planet is screaming as it boils, and there is no vaccine yet for stupidity or greed, while fascism, in a smiling mask, has slipped into our living rooms promising, insert your dream world here. Just sign on the dotted line, and sign. And sign. If the Earth's crust were not cracked, I read somewhere, tectonic plates could not shift. The pressure from the molten core would build, the planet would explode. Perhaps, I think. Or am I saying all this out loud? Cracking is a necessary part of staying sane in a world sizzling with insanity. I hope you feel much better soon, you say. Take care. And as you back away, I spot a window with a corner crack, sunshine diamonds sparkling in the fractures of its web, and further on, a tiny plant, all green and gold, thriving where the asphalt splits. At the coffee shop, a girl with mermaid hair, and the future in her eyes, though she does not know this yet, serves me a pot of tea. I'm sorry, the lid's a little cracked, she says. I think it pours okay. No worries, I reply. I guess we're all a little cracked these days.
Imagine what would become possible if we could but gaze on the wounds of the other and recognise in them our fellow fractured lives and likenesses. Imagine what would become possible if we could but see our petrified enemies as lost and longing kindred souls on a painful path to siblinghood. Imagine what would become possible if we could but turn ourselves aside from the vast and veiling illusion that vengeance ever rights wrongs.
Beautiful. He's 14 and pushing it. Later and later, the circle widens to pals and parts I'm unfamiliar. Is it safe, son? I think so, Mum. The wee one sees too much, weighs the plastic in the ocean, counts the bombs, knows the animals she couldn't save today. She tunes in too intently to the news. You're safe, little one. Are you sure about that, Mum? Maggie Smith wrote a poem about good bones. It starts, life is short, but I keep that from my children. Life is short, but I keep that from my children. Today they followed the path of a stingray across the aquarium floor. They climbed a hill with wind on their face and they laughed easily. The little one saved a beetle stuck on its back and a brother took a step back from the edge. And I thought, this place is beautiful. You two could make this place beautiful, right?
So a beautiful afternoon of poetry from everybody. And to finish it off, we've got Finola.
This poems about Coalport, and one of the things I just want to say is I occasionally dip in and out of Facebook, and there's a group that post pictures of submarines in the Clyde. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, could a protest group about that? No, they're admiring them, right? And I get angry. And when I get angry, I jump on and I write something inflammatory. Well, it's not inflammatory to me, but it's inflammatory to them. And then I go away and I never check to see who's read it or how many angry people. And I would ask you all to do the same. Close range. Out for a seaside picnic, happily we share the binoculars to scan the mirror lock. We study each shape on the swaying tide, decode its wing flash and chatter. Oyster catchers, Granny! Silver skeins spread on the vast sands. Water falls back on itself, so blue, so clear. Focus is narrowed to gleaming shallows. Here, crabs sidle away. Raising the glasses, she rakes the green shore across the bay. Granny, what's that? I note high barbed gates, chain-linked fences, slicing the now hollow hills. The tight shoals of iron grey buildings, the dark vessels hunkering below the surface, ready, waiting, and I cannot speak its name.
Marlene, you caught up with a few of the poets, didn't you?
Yes, I have been chatting to one or two people anyway, and then I thought, oh, come on, just see if you can get them on camera and chat away. And it was so lovely talking to people. You know, when you talk to someone who's actually written the poem, or if they haven't written it, they've just been so affected by it that they wanted to read it out loud, and then you get some more of that, and more kind of their background inspiration from it. So, yeah, so I hope people appreciate these as well. They were certainly fun to do. Standing here, you know, Scottish CND poetry afternoon, and you've just told us that I just really enjoyed what you said about picking up that you moved back to Scotland, or your family moved back to Scotland, and suddenly your mum and dad were doing things like going out for the messages. So was that, how old were you when that happened?
I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Right.
Yeah, so I was quite young. Everything I'd known up to that point had been talking more, I don't like to say proper English, but like it was an international community where you had to speak a more understandable form, and I didn't know that there was this whole part of themselves and the way they spoke that they'd been hiding from me all these years. And then
it's interesting, isn't it? Because it does get hidden. And I lived down in Welsh-English border for about 10 years, and there was a Scottish friend of mine who lived nearby, and whenever we got together, the Scottish accent came back in. And then I moved back up to Scotland. My daughter said to me, your accent's just got much broader, and I'm sort of going, yeah, it's great. Do you think that Scots tongue's getting a bit more, I don't know exactly accepted, but we're more aware of it as being something that's really connected with us being Scottish? And
I think so, but I think a part of it is when you're in settings where you need to be understood, you change how you speak without even thinking about it, and at the end of the day I think language is about connecting with people, and so there might be contexts where you have to kind of like tone it down to be understood, but at the same time there is the thought of, oh, it'd be nice if people could just understand. And I've had really great conversations with friends in international communities where they're so excited to learn Scots words and have even started using it themselves. So there is that side of it as well, where if you share that culture, people are often very receptive to that.
Yes, and I was in a get-together recently, and it had people from all over Europe, and they're campaigning for, if not for independence for their part of a country, or at least more autonomy. And it was noticeable that one thing that they all had in common was their own language that they spoke. And it did make me think, not so sure that's quite the case with Scotland. I mean, we do have Scots and there's Gaelic, of course, but it doesn't quite hold us together maybe the way that it does in other countries.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in Scotland you have so many different Scottish dialects, don't you? Like what Scots means to Glaswegian is very different to Aberdeen. So maybe that's a part of it. It's not so much a unifying language, I suppose. But then the variation makes it more fun.
Well, that's true, and I mean it's great. I mean, in a way, great. You know, your parents obviously kind of, you were saying, kind of hid the Scots a little bit, but immediately started it up again when they got back here. It's good. Yeah. So you enjoyed being here with some lovely poetry here this afternoon.
It's a nice venue and lovely people, and I feel like poetry, it's always so much better when you hear it when it's performed. It really brings it alive.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for talking to me.
That's
That's good. Thank you. You just read us out a poem by Kathleen and Jamie, the one that's about the dipper.
Yes.
And it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful poem. So what made you choose that one?
I think it was the simplicity and the honesty of it. I love Kathleen and Jamie's work because there's no flowery pretentiousness to it. She's doing what I think a lot of us need to learn to do, which is simply stop and look and just not enjoy but value. I think value's the word, what we've got, so that we learn how important it is. It's not going to stop bombs, but it will make people maybe more aware of what there is to lose. I admire Kathleen tremendously because of her political stance, the work she's done with Paper Boats magazine, and she does a podcast, The Lantern, I think.
That's right, yes.
And then she did the campaign with the Paper Boats at the Parliament. So she's a poet that puts herself out there, and I think it's worth praising. But also, it's just, she captures that beauty.
She does.
Of the world.
The
George Gunn poem I thought was very similar in nature, and they're short and they're tight and they speak to your heart.
Yes.
Which is what I love in poetry.
They're almost like, they're not haikus, but they've got that essential kind of character, don't they?
That's right, they cut to the chase. And they don't tell you what to think. Which I love. I think that business where she invites you into the world and reminds you that you are in this world as well, and that you should step up a bit, do something if you're not already doing
The first poem of hers I ever came across was the one that's inscribed at Bannockburn. I mean, I was in tears. It gets me in tears. And one of the particular phrases, that small folk playing their part.
I think that's crucial, isn't it? And I think that's what she's doing with that, like that campaign with the paper boats. She's inviting you to step up and not just say, well, what can I do? I'm on my own here, you know. Somebody spoke about marches and things that have been on, and I can remember a very young teenager lying down in George Square, and we all lay down in George Square, so we're talking a long time ago here, but during the day, and we were acting dead, and on your own, but it was the mass effect of that. I mean, I think the only thing that I think about poetry and about any sort of action is you never know who you influence. You never know what change you bring about in somebody, and all you can do is reach a hand out to them.
Yeah, indeed. And it may not be the change that was there when the poet wrote what they had in mind at all.
Absolutely, that's right, because I think it's very important. I used to be a teacher, and I really don't like telling people what a poem's about. You know, they've got brains, they've got emotions, they've got their own history that they can bring to a poem. So that's what I quite like to do. So I didn't make a speech about the poem, I just you can read it.
It was very nice speaking to you just now, and thanks for speaking to us. So, standing here talking to Clare Phillips.
And we set up this event supposedly for Burns Day, Burns Night, but the storm got in the way and it had to be cancelled. So here we are on the 29th of March, the rescheduled event, and it's amazing.
It's great.
Really
it's
brilliant.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had the first half. I mean, some really, really beautiful poems, and the one that you did, which was about Greenham Common, wasn't it? And you were there.
I was, yes. Not all the time. I didn't live there, but I went on several occasions. I was there to embrace the base, whatever year that was. I think it was 83 or 4, something like that. So, yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that afternoon of poetry. This is going to be an annual event. I mean, it was supposed to be timed, as you heard from the introduction. It was supposed to happen on Burns Night, but next year, hopefully, there won't be a storm to disrupt things. And if you are interested in hearing poetry recited, which is by far the best way to hear poetry, I think, then come along next year. It was a lovely afternoon, and we left feeling delighted that we'd gone. So that's always a good sign.
Yes. Thank you so much for taking me, Fiona.
Oh, and thank you, Scottish CND, for putting it on.
Exactly, yes.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to make sure you're following us and subscribe to us, then you get notified every time we put something new out, so you don't miss anything. That would be great. Also, you can click the little bell if you're watching on YouTube.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website, and we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.